Okay, hello everyone, welcome back and good afternoon. We are now approaching our last class, the fourth class for the whole GMMUN school, batch 13. And I'm really happy to be here in this particular session for today because not only that it will be our last, but it will also be the closing session of the whole GMMUN school. And I would also like to congratulate all of you for making it here to the fourth last class. And thank you for attending all four classes for the whole 1 month of January 2022. And hopefully the whole materials will be beneficial to all of you. You can use the materials, reread the materials for your next MUN conferences, be it Global Millennial MUN or any other MUN that you will attend in the future. And for today, I will start on time since tomorrow will be a public national holiday. And I'm assuming all of you have already had plans probably to go to the malls or to go outside of your house for celebrating tomorrow's holiday. And so I guess it will be better if we start on time. Now, for today, we are trying to understand about drafting in Model UN. And I've already sent 2 documents to the WhatsApp group. We have working paper and draft resolutions. These will be the 2 documents that we will discuss here today. And I will start with working paper first, and then we will move on to draft resolution afterward. Okay, so overall, we have 3 documents, right, in MUN. We have position paper, which we have already discussed in the second class. And for the last class, we will talk 2 documents altogether. First one is working paper, and the first one is draft resolution. The biggest difference is that working paper, as the name suggests, it is a paper in a working process, right? So since it is a working process, it's not done yet. It's not it's not made to be a final document for whole delegates to read and understand. So it is just a paper to help all delegates understand about what's going on in the council. On the other hand, draft resolution is the document that you make in the final part of the conference. So once you're approaching the final stage, once you're approaching the final session of the whole MUN conference, we will make what we call as draft resolution. And the biggest 2 differences are from the session of which the paper is being drafted. So for working paper, it's in the middle, while draft resolution, it's at the end of the conference. So I hope you understand the general difference between the 2 documents. Now, we will talk about working paper first, right? So in working paper, the first one that you have to know is that it consists of solutions, but in a very brief way. So compared to draft resolution, working paper only highlights the very general understanding of a solution. For example, if we have a topic of vaccination, right? What kind of solutions that we want to have to make sure that vaccinations can spread as fast as possible. For example, you and your other delegates think that the best solution to this problem is for us to cooperate between advanced countries and developing countries, right? To make things easier and faster. You don't need to specify the exact framework, right? You don't need to specify the exact timeline of how the solution will be implemented, because that's not the function of a working paper. The more detailed version of the working paper is what we call as draft resolution. Thus, in working paper itself, you only have to put the general perspective on this. I will try to share screen the example of the working paper after this, and we will try to understand it from head to toe, right? Second part is that there is no exact format and structure. So unlike draft resolution, working paper, they don't have specific format. They don't have specific structure that you have to follow. And for that matter, you can make in any other types of documents actually. So in general, you probably will see papers in the format of a document of a Microsoft Word document, right? But in some conferences, they allow you to make a working paper in the format of PowerPoint presentation, in the format of poster, in format of poster, in format of infographics, in format of probably video. As long as it helps delegates understand about the current debate, it's really, really possible for you to have those types of documents of working paper. So there's no exact format and structure, unlike draft resolution. All right. The third part is that you don't need to present it. You just have to discuss it later on in the form of formal debate. So unlike draft resolution, you don't go in front of the session and try to present it to the other delegates about what's going on in your position paper. That's the draft resolution part. In draft resolution, you're going to have to present it as if you were presenting in your class or in your college classes. But in working paper, you don't need to present it. You just have to discuss it in a formal of usual moderated caucus, just like as we have discussed last week. All right, so that's the biggest differences. Now, before I move on to the next slide, I will try to share screen the example of a working paper, right? So we can understand and try to read it from head to toe, the example of a working paper. So this is the example of working paper, right? Unlike a draft resolution, again, it has no specific format or structure. So you can put any structure that you want as long as it helps delegates to understand your block's understanding about the solutions of the issue. For example, we see that the block includes India, South Africa, Egypt, Australia, and Indonesia. So there are 5 countries in this one particular block, and they were assigned to the United Nations Human Rights Council. And the topic of the debate is Cameroon human catastrophe, right? In this particular paper of what we call as working paper, the group decides to put the keywords first as the introduction part of the document, which is fine because there's no specific format, right? The keywords here, they play a role as a guide for delegates to understand the key terms that will be frequently used in the working paper. And the next part, they use guided by. So they specify all the important documents that are really essential to the debate, right? So if we talk about human catastrophe, then we have to talk about Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for example. So these are the international conventions or documents that the group thinks really necessary to be put in the working paper. And then after that, they have pressing matters. And then after that, they have key solutions. And then for each key solutions, they will try to explain it on the second and the third page of the document, which is the elaboration of each solution. Kapdur, can I put pressing matters at the top, for example? And then I want to put keywords as the introduction part of the second document, for example. The answer is yes, you can do that because again, there is no specific format or structure. I have sent it to the WhatsApp group, so feel free to download that and keep it in your computer or laptop for references in the future. In this particular working paper, the style or the format that the group uses, it uses bullet points, right? As you can see, there is no paragraphs, right? There are no paragraphs. They only use bullet points or numberings to make things easier to read. All right, so this is the very basic example of a working paper that you can use as a reference for your next MUN conferences, right? So that's it for the working paper example document. I will move back to the presentation again. And as you can see in working paper, there are do's and don'ts. The first one is that even though you can submit it by yourself, you better have a block with you. Why is that a case? Because remember that in last week, we already know the minimum number for a draft resolution to pass, right? So if we have 30 delegates in the council, for example, the minimum number for a draft resolution to pass is 2/3 of the whole delegates, right? 2/3 dari total delegate. 2/3 of 30 is 20. So if you want to pass a resolution, you need to have at least 20 delegates on your side. So if you are in a working paper session, which is the middle part of the conference, right? We're already in the middle part of the conference, but you still don't have a block with you. You're still by yourself. You're making a working paper by yourself. It means that the progress is not really good if we see it from our perspective, right? From the chair's perspective. Yes, it does not close the possibility. Probably After 2 sessions later, you will have 20 delegates, even though your working paper is met by yourself. Yes, there's a possibility, but that's not always the case, right? And we definitely do not want to bet on something that is not certain, right? So even though you can submit it by yourself, you better have a block with you, at least half the number of the minimum number of delegates to pass a resolution. All right, so if it is 20, well, at least have 15 or 10 maybe, so that in the later sessions, it will be easier for you to find other delegates to join your side. Second part, highlight some important points of your block solution. So only highlight the important points, because remember, this is a working paper. The job, the function of a working paper is just to highlight the general perspective of the solutions that your block has already come up with. But most importantly, the function of a working paper is just to tell the chairs exactly what has been discussed in the previous sessions. Because it is only discussing about the previous sessions, in a working paper, you cannot talk about things that have not been discussed. You can only talk about things that have already been discussed, right? And as for that, we have 2 don'ts, right? 2 things that you probably shouldn't do. The first one is having too much details, right? Don't put too many details in your working paper, and don't make it already in a DR format. So this is very important, right? Why can't we make a working paper in a format of the draft resolution? First, there actually is no enough time for you to do that, because a working paper process, drafting process, is very short. So you don't have all the time you need to make a really decent draft resolution format. However, it is still possible. But remember that the chair will be very, very detailed when it comes to things like this. They don't want anyone or any other delegate to already make a draft resolution at their home before the conference starts, which is a red flag for everyone. So make sure that you show to the chairs that you make this during the conference and not before the conference starts. All right. Even though maybe you're really good at this, you're really good at writing, you're very fast at typing in a document, and then you can already make it in a DR format during the conference. Even though it can be like that, the chairs as a human, they have a subjective perspective to assess on a delegate's performance. So I would suggest for you to keep things, safe, and try to not make it already in a DR format. Because if it is, it will be very, very appearing to be very similar to your working paper later on. So it will not be recommended. But if you think that that's the good thing, if you think that the chair is fine with that, then try to do it in a smooth way. But if you think that the chair does not really permit things like this, then I will not. I will be very suggesting you not to do it either. All right. So that's the do's and don'ts. Now we move on to the next part, which is draft resolution. Working paper, as we have discussed minutes ago, it's general. It does not have a specific format or structure. And you can only discuss about things that have already been discussed in the working paper, and you cannot put things that have not been discussed. So if you plan to discuss 5 things, right? But once the working paper is closed, right? Once the working paper submission time is closed, you already have discussed 3 things. The remaining 2 things, right? It cannot be put in a working paper because the chairs will be very, very, again, detailed when it comes to like this. They will try to scrutinize every paper. And if they find matters that have not already been discussed, then they might get furious, right? So only put things that have already been discussed by the whole delegates in your council, right? But again, what's the difference between draft resolution? Draft resolution, unlike a working paper, it is the output, the conclusion, right? The summary of what has been discussed in the conference for the whole 2 days. You and your block need to write the resolution comprehensively from head to toe, from the beginning to the end. So make sure to have everything put in the draft resolution. And unlike a working paper, again, there is an exact format that you have to follow. So unlike a working paper, this time you have a format that you have to follow, and that if you don't follow that, the chair will probably not accept your draft resolution. and therefore you have to follow the structure that has been used in every MUN conference when it comes to draft resolution. All right. So next part, the structure of a draft resolution. We have two parts. First one is what we call as heading. Second part is what we call as body. The head part, the heading part, we have a United Nations or Council logo at the top, and then we have a draft resolution number. Is it 1.1 or is it 1.2? And after that, we have a list of sponsors and delegates that specify the whole countries that support this draft resolution, either as a sponsor or as a signatory. The second part is what we call as body. These are the parts of the main courses of your resolution, right? It contains your solution. It contains the background, the reasons why we have to follow this. And it is extended into two parts. The first one is pre-ambulatory. The second one is the operative clauses. The difference, apa bedanya Kak? We will talk about that by looking at the document directly. So I will stop share of this one and then move on to this. Now, right, this part. Oh, wait.
United Nations.
All right, so, okay, wait, I think, this one. So in the United Nations General Assembly, this is the heading part of the draft resolution, right? The logo of the United Nations, this is the heading part. And the later part, still the heading part, is the number of the draft resolution, which includes council, sponsors, signatories, and topic, right? Council is the body that you are simulating your country in. And for General Assembly, for this part, this is the structure of the UN. So if you take a look at if you scroll the WhatsApp group, I've already sent a chart of the United Nations, so you can see what part of the United Nations that your council is included in. For United Nations Human Rights Council, it is included in the General Assembly of the United Nations. So in terms of this, you have to make sure that you put the accurate detail, right? And after you put the council, you put the sponsors and the signatories. For sponsors or signatories, we will discuss the difference later after this because we have the specific 4-point slide on that. So basically, when it comes to sponsors and signatories, sponsors are the countries that actively contribute to draft resolution. They are basically the leaders of the whole block of the group, right? While signatories, they contribute to the drafting process, yes, but they are not leading the same as the sponsors countries do. So that's the basic differences. I will discuss it later after this. We will move on to the next part. This is the topic, right? You have to put the topic at the top before you move on to the body part, right? So starting with the Human Rights Council on this is the body part, right? The yellow all the way to the bottom is what we call as the body part. While for the green color, this is the heading part. All right, so don't be tricked to differentiate between the two. And basically the difference is that the heading part, they don't contain solutions, while the body part, they contain solutions or at least background information of the solution, right? So that's the easiest way for you to differentiate between the two. Okay, so before I start to discuss on this part, the body part, any questions so far from anyone in regards to draft resolution? Feel free to unmute your mic or type the question on the Zoom chat box. Okay, we have one. Should the logo be be black and white or color. It's not regulated strictly, so you can choose either black and white color or using non-black and white color. So it doesn't really matter actually. But in most United Nations documents, they use black and white color. So you can probably choose this black and white color version just to be safe. All right. Even though in most conferences, sometimes I also use the color version, which is fine. What's most important is for you to use the logo in an accurate way. So if you're in a Human Rights Council, do not put the logo of the United Nations Security Council, for example, which is two different part of the United Nations, right? Two different part of the United Nations. So yeah, try to use black and white, I think. And then if the chair allows you to use the color version, that will be fine. But eventually the chair will not really be bothered on this because it's not really, destructive towards the discussion of the draft resolution. So the most important part is the body part actually. This is the solution part of the draft resolution, right? So if you see on the body part, which I will erase the color, it starts with a set of words that are written in idyllic, right? Dimiringin, right? Guided by, recalling, reaffirming, emphasizing. All of these set of words are written in an idyllic form, which is the format that you have to follow. So this is not a typo. This is not a human error or anything. It is obligated for you to write it in an idyllic form. And you don't just put any random word at the beginning of the clause. This is all right, I'm gonna put the yellow color again. The yellow color, one part of this is what we call a clause. So this is what we call as a preambulatory clause. While for the body part on this one, for example, this is also a clause, but this is what we call as an operative clause. So what's the difference? What's the difference between a preambulatory clause and an operative clause on this one? Definitely in a preambulatory clause, it does not contain solution, right? It only contains background information of what we need to do as a council, right? For example, I'm going to read the yellow part. Recalling its mandate in the promotion of universal respect for the protection of human rights, the address of situations on violations of human rights, and also the prevention of human rights violations. If you read it from the beginning to the end, it does not, contain any action that countries need to do, right? The yellow clause, this one, it only says a specific mandate of the United Nations Human Rights Council, right? It only tells us that UNHRC is mandated to promote universal respect of human rights, but it does not give us any clue on how we promote universal respect. Do we have to do A? Do we have to do B? Do we have to do C? It does not contain any practical solution that countries can follow. Thus, it is called a preambulatory clause. The function of a preambulatory clause is not to tell countries on what to do, right? The function of a preambulatory clause is to provide reasons, to provide background information, to provide the urgency on why we should do A, B, or C. But it does not tell us the practical steps of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, the things that we need to do as a country, as a member of the United Nations Human Rights Council, right? The same goes within the third preambulatory clauses, this one, the one in blue, reaffirming that all human rights are universal and that all human rights must be treated in a fair and equal manner on the same footing with the same emphasis. But it does not tell us the exact way for us to treat a human right in a fair manner, right? It does not tell us that you have to do this or your country needs to do this. No, it only tells us why human rights are universal and why it has to be treated in a fair and equal manner, right? So that's the main aspect of a preambulatory clause. Now we move on to the objective clause. And as the name suggests, the word used is objective. Objective, it means that you have a specific target, you have a specific something, you have a specific activity that you want to do, right? My objective in life is to make everyone happy. So for me to make everyone happy, I'm gonna give everyone an ice cream, for example. That's an objective, right? My objective in life is to make everyone happy. So the action that I need to do to make everyone happy is to give everyone an ice cream, for example. Now, the objective of this particular draft resolution is to tackle the issue of Cameroon human catastrophe, right? So for us to eradicate the catastrophe in Cameroon, the things that we need to do is this one, the second one, the third one, all the way to the last part of the solution, right? Now we will try to look at number 4. Endorses the establishment of HAC, Humanitarian Assistance to Cameroon, as the coordination and management program of humanitarian assistance in Cameroon, in particular, Anglophone regions by the UNHRC. So the case is that there's a catastrophe, right, in Cameroon. But in that area, we don't have any specific program where we can coordinate every assistance to Cameroon. So every country, they just voluntarily give assistance to Cameroon, and instead of doing it in a coordinated manner, they only do it by a voluntary perspective, right? They only do it in a voluntary manner, which makes the area even more complex, because if the whole program, the whole assistance is not coordinated into one program of assistance to Cameroon, then the delivery of the assistance might not be on target, right? They might be sending the assistance to the wrong group, or maybe they might be sending it to the group that actually does not they're not included in the priority section of the victims of human catastrophe in Cameroon. So we need a program, a management program, where we can detect the priority, right? We can detect which area of Cameroon that needs the assistance the most. And by that particular detection program, every country can rely on HAC, they can rely on human assistance to Cameroon as a coordination program, so that they can send the delivery to the exact target that they want, and making sure that the one receiving the assistance is not the one that is not a victim of the human catastrophe in Cameroon. Really complex, I understand, but the exact purpose of number 4, objective clause number 4, is to make sure that the assistance is coordinated and not scattered, right? Making sure that every country follows the same rules, they follow the same assistance management program, and that they don't do it voluntarily. All right, voluntarily in a sense where they're doing it, under their own perspective, they're doing it without a coordinated program or anything. All right, so that's the objective clause, example of objective clause. It contains solutions, it contains specific actions, and unlike a preambulatory clause, it exactly tells the delegates or countries on what to do. If you take a look at the beginning part of the objective clause, it is not in an italic form, and instead it is in an underlined form, which is the format that you will see in every United Nations document. And not only that, it is not italicized, right? It is underlined. They don't use a gerund form. If you take a look at preambulatory, they use a gerund form, right? Recalling, reaffirming, emphasizing, acknowledging, right? But in an objective clause, they use a present form. Acknowledges, endorses, right? Emphasizes, further emphasizes, etc., etc. On the other hand, in a preambulatory clause, not only that they use gerund or verb in form, they can also use passive forms such as guided by, right? Alarmed by, concerned by, etc., etc. So that's the biggest difference. Remember that this is in an italic form, right? Italic form, and that they use a gerund, a verb ing, or they're using a passive form. But for the objective clause, they don't use an italic form, and instead they use an underlined form, di garis bawah, and they also use present forms and not gerunds, verb ing, or a passive form. So that's the biggest difference. It's very, very complicated, I understand, but you can try to read this very, very slowly and try to grasp the difference between the preambulatory clause and the objective clause. All right. So any questions before I move back to the presentation again? All right, there's a question. In the draft resolution paper, is it mandatory to use all, recalling, reaffirming, etc., or can we change the words? Okay, thank you for the question. The answer is yes. You can change it because it doesn't have to be the exact word that you see on the example of the document. So there's this words, right? So you can choose from affirming to welcoming, right? But remember to try to use the word in a relevant way. So for example, there's a word expecting, right? When you expect something, it's probably happening, but it's also not probably happening, right? So make sure to use expecting to things that are not certain, right? But when you feel that something is certain, when you feel something is strict in a firm way, you know that this is going to happen. You can use the word confident. For example, confident that human rights need to be protected in every area of the world, you can use confident, right? If you are, for example, trying to say that you are not, that your block is not satisfied with what has been done, you can try to use this, noting with deep concern. For example, noting with deep concern that the catastrophe in Cameroon is no longer tolerable and that every country has to take actions in the area. So you can also use that as a preambulatory phrase. So the answer is that you can use all of this, but make sure to try to find the relevance of each word. Try to anecdote the situation with the correct preambulatory phrases. Okay, so that's the biggest difference between draft resolution for preambulatory parts and for the body parts. This is for preambulatory, and this one is for the objective. Wait, this is the, sorry, I did say objective. Sorry, it was operative phrases, right? But it's basically the same thing, operative, objective, but most conferences use operative. Operative, as the name suggests, it comes from the word operation. So basically you try to operate over something, to do something, to realize something, right? So these are the words. They're not as much as the preambulatory phrases, right? If you take a look previously, preambulatory phrases, they have a lot of options, right? Ada banyak pilihan yang bisa dipilih. But when it comes to operative clauses, they don't have much, right? So you can only choose between accepts, from accepts to transmits or trust. And again, try to use it in a relevant way, right? Try to anecdote the situation with the correct operative phrases, and that will help you to understand the solution that you want to draft in your draft resolution. All right. Okay, now I will talk about this part, but before that, any other question from anyone? Silakan, yang ada pertanyaan about draft resolution. All right. Okay, wait. Okay, so no question so far. All right, I guess you understand about the difference. Now, as I have talked earlier, we will move on to sponsor and signatories. The difference is that for sponsors, there are countries that authored or dominantly built the DR from the get-go, and they have this natural, natural nuance as a leader in that group. Maximum sponsor is decided by the chair. It depends on the council condition. One block can have 3 sponsors. They can have 5 sponsors. Probably they can also have 2 sponsors only. So it depends on the chair's discretion. The third part that you have to know is that a country cannot become a sponsor into draft resolutions. Why? Because it will make no sense if you sponsor 2 draft resolutions, because it basically means that you will fight your own other draft resolution. If I'm a sponsor in draft resolution A, and then I'm also a sponsor in draft resolution B, and at the final stage of the MUN session, it will only be draft resolution A and B, and I cannot fight my own national interest with my own other perspective in draft resolution B, right? So you can only be a sponsor in one draft resolution, right? But things are kind of different with signatories. In signatories, you can be a signatory in more than one draft resolution. So I can be a signatory in draft resolution A, I can be a signatory in draft resolution B. It doesn't matter because you're only a signatory, right? You state your approval, but you're only stating your approval. You're not sponsoring anything. If you're sponsoring a draft resolution, it means that your country is the one that predominantly or authored the DR in a very, very comprehensive way. You contribute a lot, you put your efforts a lot, and it means that you're putting everything in the draft resolution. And as for that, you are eligible to become a sponsor. But how do you become a sponsor? Do you elect yourself, or do you ask others to choose for you? Practically speaking, sponsor choosing or sponsor voting, this is something that the group decides. So we don't use voting. Well, we can use voting, but we don't necessarily use voting to decide whose sponsor will be. But in an MUN and draft resolution drafting process, basically everyone will just choose the delegates that will become a sponsor in a natural way, right? They will eventually understand who will become a sponsor, right? But I've been in an MUN where we actually vote for a sponsor. So if there are 15 delegates, we will vote on who becomes a sponsor. The one that gets the votes more, the one that gets the votes the most, they will be the sponsor of that group, right? And okay, that's the biggest difference between sponsors and signatories. This is for pre-ambulatory clauses. So it is the opening of the resolution. Most likely it will be in verb ing, but it can also be in a word of adjective like confident, or in a word of passive form, just like alarmed by, guided by, etc., etc. It consists the background and legal basis of the solution of the issue, right? So it provides background information on why we have to discuss on this, and why it is important for us to discuss it, right? If it is important, we have to present the arguments, right? The background information on that. Okay, this is the sample that we have discussed. All right, this is the final, I think the final slide of presentation. Before I start, any other questions so far? Or is it understandable? Is it easy to understand? Because in the draft resolution, it's quite strict. It's quite, there are a lot of regulations and rules and, things that you have to be aware of so that you don't make a wrong draft resolution. All right. Maybe I will send the presentation to the group. All right. All right. Okay. So no question. Everyone, you can see on the Zoom chat box, Nisa just sent an absence form and also a feedback form. We will be very, very happy and appreciated if you can fill up both forms, the presence form and the feedback form. It will be very important for us to read the feedback from all of you. So if you think that Kabdur, your voice is too fast, right? You're speaking too fast, or maybe your voice is too low, or Kabdur, you need to try to share screen the example of a document before you discuss on the theory, or maybe you like it better if we have, just try to discuss every material, and then after that we can have a full question and answer session, or maybe you like it better if we do it the normal way, question and answer session in the middle of the conference, in the middle of the MUN school. So any kind of feedback is very, very appreciated. So you can try to fill the presence form and a feedback form, especially since this is our last session. So we'll probably not meet each other again. So a feedback will be very, very, very appreciated, right? So draft resolution. For today, it's not going to be that long compared to the first or the second session, because the slide itself, it only has 14 slides, and we already have discussed the example of the draft resolution working paper. And all right, but before I start, I've already received homeworks from all of you, right? For those of you who have submitted the homework to me personally, I have reviewed all of them, and I'm really, really impressed on how you understand the materials and you succeeded in implementing that in your homework. Thank you for that. Thank you for making your homework. And after this, if you're planning to follow or to attend an MUN conference, feel free to chat me, right? If you have any other question, but I will probably not as fast response as I am in the MUN school period, but don't worry, I will try to answer it as long as I'm online, as long as I'm holding my phone or turning on my laptop. So you can ask me any question and try to ask the question, maybe as many questions as you want. All right, it's okay, because I'm here to help you, and I'm very glad if you can help others in the future too. Okay, draft resolution. This is the mechanism of the draft resolution before it is adopted. Before we discuss on draft resolution, we have to propose a motion called introduction of draft resolution. So a draft resolution cannot be discussed if it has not been introduced earlier. So we have to propose a motion of introduction of draft resolution, right? How do we do it? You only have to raise your hand or raise your placard and says that that you want to propose a motion to introduce draft resolution 1.1, right? Or 1.2, depending on the number that you put to your draft resolution. Sponsor is the one that represents, right? Sponsor is also the one that presents the draft resolution in the front of the room, right? So if there are two sponsors, then there will be two sponsors presenting, right? It usually is 10 minutes long. And after you present the draft resolution, it will be discussed in a form of moderated caucus. So presentation, right? Introduction, presentation, and then discussion using a formal moderated caucus. And if it is using a moderated caucus, then it follows the same rules and voting mechanism as last week, discussed last week. So you have to propose a motion. You have to make sure that your motion passes the minimum 50%. And then once your motion is accepted, you can propose yourself to talk first or to talk last. It depends on your preference. It again is the same thing as moderated caucus, but the topic is the draft resolution. All right. You can criticize each other's draft resolution. You can try to point out that this is the wrong part of your draft resolution, and that is why you have to, choose our draft resolution. This is the part where you criticize, where you persuade others to follow your block, persuade others to vote for you later on. This is the part, right? This is the moment for you to do that, because once we finish discussing, there will be no more criticizing each other and it will be only voting, right? After that, discussion of DR1, and after that we can propose a motion to introduce DR number 2, for example, and then we will do it all over again, but this time it will be draft resolution number 2. Kabdur, I'm from the other block. Can I be the speaker in the moderated caucus to talk about others' draft resolution? The answer is yes. That's exactly the moment where you criticize the other draft resolution and you promote your draft resolution, right? So it's very, very okay. Now, the voting part. Quorum vote, remember 2/3, 2/3 dari total. So if there are 60 delegates, the 2/3 will be berapa tuh? 20 ya? 20, right? 2/3, 62. Oh, sorry, 30 delegates, 20, yes, but if there are 60, it will be 40 delegates, so on and so forth. So use the 2/3 formulation, right? If you pass that, then your resolution is adopted. If you do not pass the 2/3 minimum, then your resolution will not be voted. Kabdur, what if every resolution does not pass 2/3 quorum vote? Then there will be no resolution adopted. So the MUN does not adopt any resolution because it does not have any resolution that passes the minimum 2/3 quorum vote, right? That's the main aspect of draft resolution, right? Okay. All right, so we have 10 minutes left. Maybe if there's any questions since all right, there's one final slide. But as usual, before I try to discuss on this, any question about the mechanism of draft resolution? Feel free to ask and shoot your question. All right, so the final part of our session of MUN School. We have what we call as awards and recognition. All right, there's one question. In a discussion session, what do we talk? Should we just answer the question asked by the previous speaker if time is limited, or should we prioritize promoting? You can do both. You can do both. If you think that you only want to prioritize, that's okay. If you think that you want to address and entertain others' questions, that's also fine. It's all a matter of strategy, right? If you think that by answering other questions, you can convince others to follow your lead, then do it. But if you're not really good at answering questions and you think that maybe I just prioritize on promoting, that's also fine. In MUN, it's all about strategy, right? It's all about strategy. How do you promote yourself? How do you promote your draft resolution? If you think that you're shy when it comes to answering questions and that you can only be good at promoting something, that's fine. But if you think that you're really, for example, an interpersonal person, right? You're good at answering questions and you're also good at prioritizing something. You can do both as well, as long as the time is accommodative, right? If the time is stressed, right? If the time is quite stretched, then probably you need to do only one of the priority, right? So awards and recognitions. We have best delegate, we have most outstanding, we have honorable mention, and basically ranked 1, 2, and 3, right? Best delegate juara 1, most outstanding delegate juara 2, honorable mention juara 3, right? So even though it's a conference, there's also awards. So basically it's also a competition. And these are the awards that are awarded to delegates who contribute a lot, who actively put their contribution into the whole discussion, right? And as chairs, we try to promote these awards to delegates who are active from beginning to the end. So if you're only active on the later part of the session, right? We have 5 sessions and you're only active on the 4th and the 5th. And there's this other delegate who has been active from day 1, from session 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5. And probably we'll prioritize those delegates, right? That are active from the beginning, instead of just being really active, but only in the later part. There's a lot of factors, right? We try to take a look on how beautiful the speeches are, right? Sometimes we see delegates who talk really clearly, they can convince others, but probably they're not really good at leading. So they will not be awarded in any of this, right? So if you ask me, Captain, what are the criteria? What are the factors that can help me win an award in MUN? A lot of factors actually, but conclusively, you can focus on 4 aspects: speech, drafting, negotiation, and also writing, right? Or drafting, speech, negotiation, writing, and also speaking, right? It's very important, right? Negotiation is used in every discussion. How you persuade others is a factor for you to win. Writing or drafting is when it comes to resolution or working paper or position paper. If you only talk good, but you cannot write good, then the chair will probably prioritize others instead of you, right? Negotiation, writing. Next one is speaking, right? Speaking is very important in every discussion. You have to have that. And the last one is research, right? You can talk a lot, you can talk many things, but if you do not research, then you will only be speaking things that are not relevant. All right. In Indonesia, we have a phrase, tong kosong nyaring bunyinya. Make sure you don't fall into that category. Right? Try to talk a lot based on facts, based on factual research, based on something that is real. You don't make that up, right? So that's very important. Research, speaking, writing, draft, negotiation. Research, speaking, writing, negotiation. Those all four are the most important factors for you to win best delegate, most outstanding, honorable mention. Kapdur, how about verbal commendation? This is just a commendation. It's not a certificate. Well, sometimes it is certified, but not every conference provides a written certification for verbal commendation. So basically, the chair thinks that you should win, but there are people that are better than you, so you don't win. But the chair still thinks that you deserve something, and is what we call as verbal commendation. The last part is best position paper. It's not within the main category, but it is still an award. This is awarded to delegate who has the best position paper, the most beautifully written position paper, and it's really good, right? The research is compact, right? And they write it in a format that is so easy to read, and they provide solutions that are very, very practical. They're very good, they're fresh, they're new, and they provide, urgency or matters that probably are really, really contributive to the discourse of the discussion. And that's why he or she wins best position paper, right? But this is not in the main category. Still, you can win best position paper, and then at the same time, you can still win best delegate. So you will often see delegates who are really good that they win two awards, right? They win best delegate, and they also win best position paper. Or they win honorable mention, and they also win best position paper. Abdul, can I be best delegate and honorable mention at the same time? The answer is no. Only one delegate wins one of these, right? You can also you cannot be a best delegate and also a verbal combination, right? But when it comes to best position paper, you can have both, right? You can be a verbal combination and then a best position paper at the same time. You can be a most outstanding and a best position paper at the same time. It is I would say, not the main category of the award, so you can still win both of the awards from the main category and the non-main category, which is best position paper, right? Okay, that will be all for today. And it's quite simple, but again, this is the most important part of the session. Drafting is very important, right? Any question before I close, and Nisa can probably send the group presence and feedback form link again. Any other question so far? I will, again, as usual, I will share the recorded session later after the session ends. If there is no question, we will close the MUN school for batch 13 with, again, the same quote from day one. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. Jadi kalau kita mau mulai, teman-teman, nggak perlu jadi juara satu dulu, nggak perlu jadi keren dulu, ya. You don't have to be great to start. Tapi kalau misalkan kita mau jadi orang sukses, mau jadi orang keren, then you have to start now. You have to start as soon as possible. Right? Start from today, start from this exact minute, exact second, right? So you can be a great person. All right, no question. I'll say that's it for today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lisa, for assisting. This is the presence form for you to fill, right? So feel free to fill this one up. And maybe this is not obligated by me, but maybe you want to follow my Instagram. Feel free to follow my Instagram on this part. maybe we can have, another session together in other programs. Feel free to DM me, ask me for follow back. I will definitely follow all of you back since you guys are my mentees in the program. Right? That's all for today. Thank you everyone. Kita ketemu lagi di lain kesempatan. Sorry kalau aku ada salah kata, salah ngomong, salah apapun ya. It's my fault and I hope you guys can accept my apology. Thank you everyone. Sukses semuanya, aku doain, dan kita ketemu di any other occasion. Thank you everyone. Makasih ya udah datang ya.
Thank you, Kak.
Yuk sama-sama.